My fear, as I've said before, is I don't really think that Trump understands Putin's sort of positioning and manoeuvring. And then on the ceasefire point, it's easy to say, it's much harder to implement. Technical conditions.
Ukraine appears to have given up most of the territory it captured in Russia's Kursk region, with Kyiv's troops reportedly pulling back across the border. Now, despite the ceasefire proposal agreed by Ukraine and the US yesterday, Russian forces are continuing to advance elsewhere, including in the east of Ukraine, where they hold large swathes of land. In the last hour, Ukraine's President Zelensky has been speaking. Here he is. You'll hear the voice of a translator. He's talking here about the prospect of a ceasefire with Russia.
Everything depends now on whether Russia is willing to do so, to instill truce, or it is rather willing to continue killing people. Everything depends on this country today.
Right, the words spoken by a translator of President Zelensky. Let's go to the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. We can talk to Jack Clover, who's reporting from there for The Times. Jack, first of all, what can you tell us about the Ukrainian withdrawal from Russia's Kursk region?
Good afternoon. Yes, well, it's quite hard to get a clear picture at the moment, but it looks like we've got Russian troops in the centre of Sudzha, which is one of the main and the largest town that Ukraine seized in that region when they went over the border last summer. Russia has got into a position where they can fire upon one of the main arterial roads heading from Ukraine's Sumy Oblast, from Sumy itself into Kursk. This is one of the main ways that they supply themselves. And it looks like some Ukrainian units have been falling back over the border into Sumy, into Sumy region. And so this does look like quite a difficult situation for them. It started a few days ago and coincided with the end of or the pause of US intelligence sharing, which did, we believe, have quite a big impact on Ukraine's ability to fight back against what was a Russian counter-offensive with the help of North Korean troops there.
Right. The US does say it has restored intelligence sharing now. Is that likely to make any kind of immediate impact?
It's hard to say. I mean, Ukraine are on the back foot. As far as I understand, the intelligence was mainly used for aerial drones to be able to keep the Russians at a distance. And so now that they seem to have broken through some Ukrainian lines, it's difficult to see how much that intelligence will help. But obviously, it's good news that they have it back. Whether or not that changes the situation on the battlefield now, we'll have to see.
Yeah, I should have asked you this right at the start, but we do need to make this clear, Jack. The fighting is continuing. It has not stopped.
No, it's very much continuing. As far as we understand, there are firefights going on within the city of Sudzha as we speak, and in parts of that Russian oblast and region that's closer to the Sumy region and the border with Ukraine. So the fighting is very much continuing.
So the talk of a ceasefire, it's exactly that. It's just talk, isn't it?
Yes, well, it always was a bit of a gambit yesterday and an opportunity to prove to the world that Russia is not acting in good faith, and that's what the Ukrainians believe, and it seems that that's the case. And I mean, in Dnipro last night there were 20 drones in the region. We had infrastructure targets and people hit. In Odessa, 4 sailors were hit, foreign nationals. The war has not changed pace in any way. In a way, it's actually increasing pace and intensity. The assaults in the Kursk region are showing that, and also the constant pressure on the line in the Pokrovsk area of Donetsk is also intensifying. So, no, Russia has not shown any signs of preparing for some form of ceasefire, and obviously we'll have to wait and see what happens when Steve Witkoff gets to Moscow and speaks with President Putin or with his team to see what their official response is going to be to this proposal of the 30-day ceasefire.
And if it's possible, can you tell us what the mood on the ground is? Any locals you may have encountered? Are they deeply cynical about the prospect of Russia signing up to a ceasefire?
Yes, but in a way there's an optimism as well, because it's an opportunity to show the world that Russia's not acting in good faith, which is what they have been saying since the beginning, and that any piece of paper which Russia signs, they can't trust. That's been their position from the beginning, and they have lots of reason to believe that because for years the Minsk agreements about a decade ago, which was sought to end the war in Donbass, they were broken multiple times by the Russian side, and so in a way, Ukraine woke up this morning with a war that they've known for 3 years, a war which is intensifying on various fronts, but at least there's a chance that they can win back the confidence of their greatest ally in proving to them that Ukraine does want peace and it's Russia that doesn't.
Jack, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. That's Jack Clover in the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. We have just got contact with our correspondent, the Economist Oliver Carroll in Kyiv. We'll talk to him in a moment. But as Jack Clover in Dnipro was saying, peace talks are underway. American envoys heading to Russia tomorrow in a bid to bring Russia, the Kremlin, to the table. Here's the American Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, saying it's now up to Moscow to agree to the ceasefire.
We're going to bring it to them directly. We're going to say that Ukraine is prepared to stop all battlefield activity and begin the immediate process of negotiating an enduring end to the war. And we'll see what their response is. If their response is yes, then we know we've made real progress and there's a real chance of peace. If their response is no, it would be highly unfortunate and it would make their intentions clear. So that's what we're hoping to hear from them. And obviously, as I said, this was not prearranged for them. So they're probably processing the news the same as the rest of the world is. So we hope to have a positive answer from them. The ball is truly in their court.
Marco Rubio, let's talk to Oliver Carroll of The Economist in Kyiv. Oliver, do you really believe that it's not been prearranged? Because if the Russians just don't want to play any part in this ceasefire, then the Trump White House is going to look utterly ridiculous, isn't it?
Hi, good afternoon. Well, for my own information, and I've been speaking to some of the participants of the talks, there wasn't a sense the Americans came to the talks with this prearranged proposal, which had been agreed by the Russians. This is still in the balance, and it's still subject to agreement from the Russians. I mean, for me, the $64 million question is, who are the Americans? It's almost like the 24 minds of Billy Milligan. You don't really know which America you're talking to. Up until now, I mean, the Ukrainians had been, faced with this bunch of yapping hyenas in the White House. And then up until the evening of Monday, for example, they were expecting to see this pugnacious Steve Witkoff in the main negotiating position. In the end, it was Marco Rubio, who you've just heard, and Michael Waltz, these sort of old school conservative hawks. So who is going to take the ideas to Moscow? It looks like it's Witkoff. Ukrainians are happy that they're seeing this rational side of America. That, as I say, speaking to people throughout the day and getting these thumbs up and people saying, we're quite surprised things are going so well. So the language was good. The language of the communique, which I understand took actually half of the 8 hours negotiation time, it was good. It talks about reciprocity from Russia. It's taken a long time to get here. And as I said, I don't actually know what the US game is with Russia. So far, we've seen threats of sanctions against the reality of actions against Ukraine. And I don't actually have seen any evidence that Mr. Trump isn't about to be played or ready to be played by Putin. So I'm not really sure where we are there. Again, the sort of 24 minds of Billy Milligan again.
Yeah, OK. So let's say Witkoff goes to Russia tomorrow. Is there any chance there'll be any kind of end to the fighting by the weekend? No, I don't think that's likely. And I don't think anyone really believes it's like them. I mean, the government sources I speak to, reckon, Putin's going to take a little while to decide what his position will be. But it's important to really state that up until now, Russia has not been negotiating. Whatever America might think, it's been America negotiating on behalf of Russia, putting its conditions on Ukraine. And I don't think we're going to see Putin saying no to Trump. I think it will be a yes. Of course, we'll do whatever you want, but
And I think what that but will be, that's the important thing. And that's the question which we'll wait to see. Let's see. I mean, at a guess, I think, Russia will try to do what it's always done and look for things that are unimplementable by Ukraine, which might seem absolutely acceptable on the surface. For example, it might be something about Russian language, which isn't really the issue that Russia's put it to be, or it might be the Russian church, which is basically being used to influence and subvert. It could be about elections. Again, it seems totally reasonable. Elections, democracy are great, but all these things I've just mentioned are designed to provoke protest and instability inside Ukraine. And I think Putin will add a lot of flattery, as he always does. My fear, as I've said before, is I don't really think that Trump understands Putin's sort of positioning and manoeuvring. And then on the ceasefire point, it's easy to say, it's much harder to implement. Technical conditions, we don't quite know what they'll be. Who's going to monitor them? Are you going to put OCSE peacekeepers in Ukraine? Well, they're already pretty devalued in Ukraine. And as I say, I speak to government insiders all the time, and a lot of them are very skeptical that it will even start. So that's where we are.
Thank you. Rather a bleak assessment there from Oliver Carroll of The Economist. He is in Kyiv.